Okay, today's topic is highly sensitive children. I'm talking with clinical psychologists Dr. Nicole Chavez and Dr. Parie Faridnia, who led a seminar on highly sensitive children at a play therapy conference last year, and I've wanted to talk to them ever since. They're both strong believers in prevention and early intervention and are certified experts in parenting, prenatal postpartum mental health, play, adolescence, and family therapies. They explain in this episode how to know if you have a highly sensitive child and what parenting approaches are going to work best for them if you do. Both ladies either are highly sensitive themselves or are raising a highly sensitive child, which is why I thought they would bring the perfect balance of research and real life experience to this conversation. We have a lot to learn from them, and we have a lot to learn from our highly sensitive children. Have a listen.
Go, Mommy! Go! The best mom ever. You are the best mom ever.
This is the Go Get Mom podcast.
I learned about, I would say, at least 10 years ago now, something like that, about the highly sensitive person trait and found out that I was highly sensitive. And so that, of course, made me more interested in finding out, how that might impact children. And then sort of just started from there and dug deeper and did a lot of reading and training and all sorts of things because, learning about it as a trait and not a disorder, we learn a lot about disorders in graduate school, but not so much about temperament and traits that exist in the global population. 20% of the global population is considered to be highly sensitive, and that's 1 in 5. So it's not uncommon, at least. And these children are being misdiagnosed, a lot of times with different disorders and ailments, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little later here. But it's really important to know who your child is through and through, and this is one of those traits. Not all of them, but this is a big part of who they are if they do have this trait. So, but yeah, that's sort of how I got into it. I don't know, Nicole, if you wanted to share.
Yeah, very similar to Parie. Like she said, I think about, and I can remember because I can actually I have a vivid memory in my head of when someone told me I was highly sensitive. And so I didn't even know until someone who else was highly sensitive told me I was highly sensitive. And it was about almost 10 years ago. And so it was the same because it explained a lot for me. Like when I was like, oh, that makes so much sense about who I am, and kind of it allowed me to see things differently and kind of how I can cope with things differently. And so kind of the same as Pari, like learning about myself led me to want to learn more, and then starting to recognize it like in our clients. And then since Pari, that, we share an office space, and so we're together a lot at work, and we're both highly sensitive. We were able to talk about it and understand each other. And then the more we learned about it in our clients, I think, like she said, you just sort of take on like this passion for it. And then what can we do with it in terms of our practice, and how can we help our clients? And so I think that's how it kind of all started.
Sure. And I think it's interesting that both of you didn't discover this until you were both adults, I guess, right?
Yeah,
A way that you have been
absolutely.
functioning and going through puberty and who knows what else with this trait that you weren't recognizing until adulthood. I think that's really interesting. And probably speaks to why you are so passionate about helping children understand this trait
Yes.
about themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I think growing up as a highly sensitive, and nobody knows that you're highly sensitive, you don't know yourself. And if your parents don't understand, again, like Pari said, sometimes these misdiagnoses or even just misconceptions about what is going on for the child, and then it's not always helpful. And so one of our goals and passions is to help children and help parents better understand this so that they can like be able to cope and manage a little bit better.
Sure. I imagine a lot of parents right now are then going, "Oh, crap. Is my child highly sensitive? Am I doing that right now?" So, what are some of the best ways to help a parent understand, "Hey, maybe you have a highly sensitive child?"
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be good to kind of talk about like what a highly sensitive child is, and I can do that. And then if Nicole, you want to talk about how you might be able to tell, that might be good.
Absolutely.
Sure. So a highly sensitive child, we like to use the acronym DOES, and that's from Dr. Elaine Aron, who is one of the main founders of the trait, the highly sensitive person trait. The trait's been around in existence forever, but it was just named probably in the late 80s, early 90s, and along with some other colleagues of hers. And so the trait itself has, we like to break it down into DOES. So D would stand for depth of processing, which means that a highly sensitive child or person processes everything at a very deep level, even like commonplace tasks, just things that you're asking your child to do or things that you think aren't very complex tasks. But for a highly sensitive person, the way that the brain works is they process everything on a very deep level and are so invested in it that that's why when you ask them, okay, now go over here and do this, it's like you're yanking them out of the depths of the sea when it looks like they're just sweeping or doing something really common, and that their mind's somewhere else. They're really invested in the task and in whatever they're doing, or something that they're doing in their life, whether it be playing a video game or playing with their toys or whatever. It may look like they're not doing much, but there's a lot underneath the surface, and that's kind of those hidden depths, which is also the depth of processing. So that's the D. O would stand for easily overstimulated, or
Mhm.
overwhelmed. So a highly sensitive child absorbs more stimuli of the world around them. And that could mean all the different senses, all the different feelings of people around them, everything, temperature, all the different, environmental, everything that's going on in their physical environment as well as in the emotional environment around them. They are absorbing it like a sponge. And so they absorb more. More of their brain is working when they're doing any kind of task or anything anything that they're doing. So of course it makes sense you're going to be more overwhelmed more easily, because anyone that's taking on that much, it would make sense that they're going to get overstimulated and overwhelmed. And that's when these like meltdowns happen, and things like that, that I think parents are like wondering, where is this coming from? I don't understand where this is coming from. And we could definitely talk more about that. But that's the O. E is for emotional responsiveness. So, and also can stand for empathy, increase empathy. So it's kind of twofold. So the E is like you have that the increased emotional responsiveness to both positive and negative emotions. So it's the exact same like level of intensity for joy, like even for joy. So something that might be like tiny little pleasure for someone, the highly sensitive child might get so excited
Mhm.
about it. And maybe you just found a rock on the beach and you're like, oh, I thought of you and I saw this. And they might just be over the moon excited about that. So they can feel increased levels of joy more than people that do not have a highly sensitive trait. But they also, that means on the other end of it, they can feel increased levels of pain and sadness. They just feel things more intensely across the board. And also with that, empathy. So they feel more empathy for people. And empathy is not the same as sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes and really just being there and like looking through their eyes and being them with them if they're experiencing something hard or even happy. Anything that someone's experiencing, they don't have that veil of like separation. Sometimes they're just sort of feeling what other person is feeling.
Sure.
So that's sort of the empathy piece, and it's hard to like turn that off,
Mhm.
definitely. And the S then would be, yeah, you're just really, you can sense subtleties around you. So really all those details, you notice tiny little details, you notice like, you know, the tiniest details changes in the environment. If you change anything about their room or you move something or, you know, they're noticed, the tiniest little detail. Maybe you made their favorite dish like slightly differently and they're like this is not the same thing and you're like how did you even notice that you know and it's something that is it's almost like a noticing those nuances. So that's the DOES. That's basically what the trait is.
Yeah.
So that's I wanted to just go
That's
over
so
that
helpful,
briefly.
definitely. And then, yeah, Nicole, so then how do we see these as parents? What are we most likely going to see these interpret as so we can go, aha, that's my kid?
Okay. Sure, of course. And there are lots of different things. And I am a parent to a highly sensitive child. And so it's easy for me to see these things because I deal with this on a daily basis. And I like my parents to know this because I get it. Like I understand what it's like to parent a highly sensitive child because it's not always easy. But kind of translating what Parie talked about in DOES into kind of what does this look like in real life. Like some of the things she said, like she talked about the emotional piece, so just the big emotions. Like she said, sometimes they may have like meltdowns over like the littlest things, and you're kind of like, why is this such a big deal
Mhm.
to you? Like, why are you so like upset? Or this little tiny thing like just leads to like tears, or on the opposite end, like she said, like getting excited about finding a rock. Like that is truly what they look like. My son, like one day, like when we wash the truck, he likes to be able to play in the hose. So we were like going to wash the truck, and he's like, "This is the best day ever." And I'm just like, "We're just washing a truck right now."
Aw.
But he was just so excited to play in the water that this is the best day ever. So they literally look just like Pari said, like excited to find a rock. Like you'd be like, "Why are you so excited about that?" So just these emotional reactions that most people would just not understand. Um, the sensory piece, I think, is a huge one to kind of notice. I know a lot of people will look for this again in other disorders like autism spectrum, but the highly sensitive child is also going to have a lot of sensory stuff going on for them. Things like they may notice noises that most people don't hear, smells that most people don't notice. Like my son is always like, "What's that smell? What's that smell?" And most people are like, "What are you talking about? I don't smell anything." So like she said, like picking up on those subtleties and just noticing these small details and small things, or he'll, you know, he can hear things that most people like can't hear, or they're gonna complain textures. A lot of times they're gonna have some difficulties with textures, whether it be tags in their shirts, the way their socks fit, types of pants they like to wear, how tight or loose their clothing is. Even if it gets wet or dirty, they may not want it to wear it anymore. Like having their hands dirty may be a big issue for them. They may want to wash their hands a lot. They just don't like the way it feels because, like Pari said, they're taking in so much extra stimuli. So everything is just so much more sensitive that it can feel uncomfortable
And
for
doesn't
them.
that even show up,
Um,
like, neurologically? Doesn't it show up that they're responding to, like, this stimuli the same way? Like, doesn't it I'm trying to think of what study I'm thinking about, but do you know what I'm talking about? Where, like, an MRI is done and the brain is lighting up? Um
their brains do light up a little bit differently when they're like, so their mirror neuron areas are much more active. So they definitely have, when they're presented with certain types of stimuli, like their brains definitely get a little bit more activated than a non highly sensitive child's
Mhm.
would.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's just so interesting that it's
Um,
down to this, like, biological level, because I think a lot of people think, "Well, it's because you didn't make them wear uncomfortable socks when they were younger." You know, you get a lot of
Mhm.
parent blaming. So I like to highlight the
no, but
biological piece so that we don't keep kind of parent blaming about a lot of this stuff.
right, and this is like this is within their their nervous system, like how they feel things. It's not just, yeah, like Pari said, it's a trait, and there is that it's kind of embedded in who they are. Like it doesn't just develop. out of nowhere, and it doesn't just go away out of nowhere. Like, we're born with it, and we just have to learn how to cope with it, so that we can manage when we're feeling, like Pari said, like overwhelmed and
Sure.
overstimulated.
And I'm sorry I
Um,
interrupted. You
because
might have had some other signals
no.
to look for. That jumped in my head.
Oh no, absolutely. Like Pari said, being like the big emotion or being easily overwhelmed and like overstimulated, that which can lead to some of the meltdowns. But a lot of times these kids will kind of retreat and withdraw, um, in order to like kind of re-regulate themselves. So sometimes you'll see them like maybe just be off playing by themselves. They may prefer that, rather than playing with other kids or with large groups, because it's less overwhelming for them. So they're pretty content sometimes just like hanging out in a corner, like playing with their cars or drawing or coloring or whatever. Or maybe if they're in an overwhelming situation, they may remove themselves to kind of take like some time out and time away, and maybe like, where'd Johnny
Mhm.
go? Maybe Johnny's like off in a corner or up in his room, kind of re-regulating. So being out in big crowds, can be really hard for them, and you may see some acting out behaviors, because they're getting a little dysregulated and they're not really sure how to manage, especially like the younger kids who maybe haven't learned like coping skills or ways, they can manage. You may see some behavioral problems like out and about, like at restaurants, if you're taking them to Disneyland, or anywhere there's maybe a lot of people or just a lot of things, going on for them. Um, I think those are some, I don't know, probably like any other things that you can think of that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think you cover the bases quite well. It's hard to tell. I think sometimes parents um, will these meltdowns are happening, and the meltdowns happen a lot because, like we were talking about, both of us, the nervous system is so overwhelmed, and they've taken on so much, and they've had to deal with so much. Often this will happen like at the end of a school day, so they'll go to school and they'll have to be on all
Mm.
day with all these kids and dealing with teachers and having to do things a certain way, how other people want them to do them, even if they're uncomfortable, but they've been trying to manage it all day. And then they get home and they're like, nothing has happened yet. And all of a sudden they're acting out and they're having like a meltdown of some kind. And even like being mean, toward their parent, or lashing out at their parent. And so a lot of times parents will be confused because they're like, well, you're describing this beautiful, like loving child, and my child's not always like that. Um, and especially not toward me. I hear about it from other adults that they're a wonderful child. They're, behave well in school, or, like they have good, friends, or they're just like almost like a different child. And then they come home and they're not that way sometimes. That can be one presentation of, of a highly sensitive child. So it's not all children that are like this, but they were like, well, I don't know how empathetic that they are, because like I don't see that part of them sometimes. And I explain it to the parents as like, well, like they've had to be on all day for other people, and you are their safe
Mhm.
haven. You are their safe person.
That's right.
And the fact that they're even acting out with you is, I know it sounds strange, but it's actually a compliment.
I mean, yeah, they trust you so much.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. So that's just to paint the other side of it, of like, yeah, these children are wonderful, but they have their moments where it's hard to even have empathy for them sometimes, because of how massive the meltdown is, or how massive the meltdown can be. In that moment, it's like, wait, I don't know where this is coming from. I wasn't even there. I just asked you how your day
Mhm.
was, or I just asked you, why are you like, you need to go when we get home, I need you to go and clean, your room, or something like that. Just a basic comment. And then all of a sudden they just snap, and the parents are often like, why did this happen? I don't understand. Again, they've been in depth, right? They've been like sort of compressing down all day of their own feelings to make room for other people's
Mm.
feelings. And so, they just need to express themselves a lot at the end of the day. So we'll do a lot in terms of like, okay, let's wait to like deal with like the real world until they just need a little break after school, you know? Like they just need a little time out after school just to calm down, calm their bodies down, calm their minds down. Maybe some sensory soothing things to help calm them. And then we can try to like, okay, let's talk about dinner or the rest of the day or homework or whatnot. So sometimes it's just about timing too. But yeah, that's something that I think, sometimes parents will have a hard time understanding because they see all the different parts of their child, and it's hard to understand how they could also be highly sensitive when they're acting out in so intensely
Well, that's
sometimes.
yeah, that's good to point out because it is an important piece. And yeah, I agree. I'm an intake coordinator at a children's counseling center, and very often that is the comment of teachers are giving rave reviews and friends' parents are giving rave reviews, but I'm not having that kid at home. And we do the same exact thing of explaining that it's because you're their safest person. I'm sorry to sorry to be the one to announce this to you, but that's them showing that they trust and feel safe with you. And that does kind of lead to another area I wanted to discuss, which is where do you know the line between enabling them, so you're not properly preparing them to go into the world because eventually this overwhelming, noisy, high sensory world is gonna hit them. Um, how do you know the difference between I'm not preparing them for this real world, I'm just delaying the inevitable, and breaking them because you've overexposed them to the real world? So, like you said, when they're acting up, you feel like, well, I can't have a brat in the house, and they need to be
Right.
disciplined and they need to know not to do this and that. How do you know that line with highly sensitive kids?
It's a hard line to know. I think that's a really common struggle that I mean, probably the most common thing that I talk about with parents of the highly sensitive children that I see. Um, I mean, literally every single week, at least, I'm having this discussion. Because it's a really good point that you bring up, Cindy, because you want to make sure they are prepared for the world around them. But what I would like to counter that with is being existing as a highly sensitive person is a challenge every single day. So even existing and getting through the day, just like any other day, is such a challenge that like they are so strong. Like these kids are so strong just because they are different. They're only 20% of the population and they are different than other kids. So they're always feeling different. They're always feeling off. They might be left out. They might be more likely to be bullied, and we know these things because they're not going to follow along with other kids and make fun of other kids or poke fun. You're not going to make these jokes that aren't really funny. They're not going to follow along with those things. So just by the sheer nature of existing as a highly sensitive child is very hard and actually is already making them
Mm.
tough. And so that's, I think, what I'd like to counter that with because it's so hard to be a highly sensitive person in this world that is not, it's made for we like to say it's made for the 80%, which is the people that do not have the highly sensitive trait. So because 20% of the population does have a highly sensitive trait, 80%, that means 80% doesn't. So the world is made for the 80%, which is what you're saying. But the fact that they have to exist, and we, as a highly sensitive person myself too, having to exist in the world for the 80%, every day is a struggle.
Mhm.
So I think that every day they are, becoming more and more strong because they're getting through that day. And so they are going to be prepared for whatever the world throws at them because even if it's hard, because everything is hard.
Gotcha.
So I, so I guess that's the counterpoint. And that's what I like to try to help the parents, especially the parents who are not highly sensitive. You know, they have a harder time grasping, like, no, but I need to prep them for these things. And I'm like, listen, like I get that, but know that they already have so much going on that your message is not being
Mm.
heard by them. The message, they're not even hearing that. All they're hearing is that you want them to do something else that they don't feel like they have the bandwidth inside of them to give. And so they're either going to be acting out, they're going to be ignoring you, they're going to be trying to change a subject. These are all signs that like it's just too much for them right now. So it's almost like, and we talk about how you need to accept the highly sensitive child for exactly who they are, every single part of them first. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have them change, okay? But you can't lead with the change. You have to lead with the acceptance of them. Because once they feel accepted, they will feel calmer. Their nervous system will calm down. They will feel more understood. That understanding is such a healing balm. I can't even describe how effective understanding your highly sensitive child is and accepting them. That in and of itself, which doesn't even feel like an action, I understand. It's more a way of being. It's not even what the words are that you use. It's the way that you talk with your child. It's the way that you interact with their child. That is what they are going to interpret that, because remember they also know what you're feeling.
I was just
So
thinking that as you were saying it.
So it's really important to understand them, accept them, and then once they feel that way, they are going to be more likely to want to get better and change. But it's kind of like, I mean, I don't know how, as adults, even I can feel this when someone wants you to be like, hey, you need to change X, Y, and Z about yourself. And I'm like, you don't even know me.
Mm,
So you don't even know what I need to do and change because you're not even aware of all the different parts of me and how those interact and intersect. So the understanding piece is first before the change, and the acceptance is so important. And it's really hard to have that. I understand because it feels like you're giving in um, or saying that everything, all these behaviors that are not acceptable are okay. You don't have to agree with it, but you do have to, like, if you really want to help your highly sensitive child, you have to accept them, warts and all, I
mhm.
guess. So that's the way that I talk to parents about that.
No, I love that, and as you were saying all that, I just started thinking to myself that the perspective just needs to shift from
Mm-hmm.
trying to how I'm when I'm asking that question, I'm imagining preparing a highly sensitive 20 percenter to become an 80 percenter by the age of 18.
Mm,
And the perspective needs to shift to that's not on the table of what we would want. And when
yeah.
you talk about all the gifts that they have, we need big feelers. We need people
Yes.
who empathize
Goodness.
for the world. The 20 percenters are probably how we've been able to progress as humans. They're probably behind every movement, every change in society,
Yes.
every whistleblower. So, yeah, maybe not having this 80 percenter expectation of them and recognizing that that's not what they are at all. So we'll take that off the table as an option. And instead, prepare your 20 percenter to be an adult. Okay.
Yeah. Their version of an adult.
Right. Which would be, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to, if I'm thinking out what I'm thinking, then I'm thinking out probably what other parents are thinking. Is someone who knows how to handle all that feeling, someone knows how to channel
Mm-hmm.
it in a way that's going to be productive for society and fulfilling for them. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so changing what changing what we see possible for our children, and not in a bad way. I don't mean that as something isn't
Mm-hmm.
possible, because anyone can achieve anything if they want. But I'm thinking if you have a highly sensitive child, then maybe the hopes and dreams that they have are going to look different, and you need to get aligned with being excited about those things as well. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You're exactly correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, but I think that's the big thing, right? Because I remember when our son was going through the terrible twos, and now whether or not he's a highly sensitive child, he's like on the fence. I don't know if he is or not. It's definitely very, he's an empath, but I don't know about some of he doesn't
Mhm.
have a lot of the sensory stuff. So I'm trying to find where he
Mhm.
lies on the spectrum. But I remember when he was younger and he was doing things that kids do, tantrums and all that other stuff. And just the first thing I thought is my parents, my family members, people in the community can't
Mhm.
think that this is okay with me. I have to stop, I've got to show them that this, isn't okay. And you have so much pressure to lay the hammer down on these kids, especially in public. I think if you can have an internal boundary already in your mind of what is enabling my child versus what is breaking them, maybe that makes those
Mm,
moments easier to navigate. You know what I mean?
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you go, I just
Yeah.
remember, I can remember a couple times where somebody's, like a teacher said, "Oh, he was misbehaving in class." And the first thing I did, I didn't even ask him any questions. He was in trouble. He making sure she sees how tough I am with him, like she's gonna
Mhm.
know that doesn't
Mhm.
fly in my house. And I was thinking more about her perception
Uh,
of me as a parent than I was like what even
Ah,
happened. And then later I would get more of the story from him that it wasn't quite black and white the way it seemed. And I regretted
yeah.
how hard I was. Um, and I imagine that parents of highly sensitive kids probably deal with that all the time.
Absolutely. I think it's so hard, especially, and maybe Nicole, you can speak to this too, but I think it's hard if you are highly sensitive as a parent, and it's hard, right? Like, because you are worried about, I mean, it's so hard because you are worried about whatever people are thinking. I mean, it's very prominent on your mind. So
yeah.
how do you like manage that when you're dealing with a situation like that?
Yeah, and like so, Cindy, I heard a couple things, and like right, like how you want this teacher to perceive you as a parent, and how your child is being perceived, and wanting to be sensitive to your child and making sure that they're taken care of. And it is hard as a parent, as a highly sensitive parent to a highly sensitive child, that I want to take care of him and make sure, I want to be sensitive to his needs, and I don't want to be overly harsh or critical. Number one, they don't respond well to that type of parenting anyways. But at the same time, right, I want to prepare him and make sure that I'm not enabling him. It is a fine line, because I understand what he's going through. And I try to explain to teachers like ahead of time, like, this is who my kid is, and this is what's going on for him, and this is how you deal with him. And sometimes that helps a little bit, depending on the teacher, of course.
Mhm.
But this concept of enabling them versus what's going to break them, and like Pari had said, sometimes they just figure it out on their own, and just allowing them to be, they will figure it out. Like, I mean, I have two, like, for me, that popped in my head, examples of my son. Number one, when he started kindergarten, man, his kid was so overwhelmed. Like, he couldn't deal. I mean, he had a really hard time. And at lunchtime for a whole month, my poor son, and I didn't even know this was happening, so it breaks my heart. Nobody told me for a long time. He was sitting in a corner between a wall and a trash
Aw.
can, stuffing wood chips into his shoes to regulate himself, because he was so overwhelmed with all the kids and all the commotion at recess.
Oh, poor baby.
But with some space, right? But with some space and some time, he was able to figure it out. Like, he didn't need to be pushed or told what to do or reprimanded. Like, this is not okay. It took him a while, but a month later, he was on the playground. He had a little coaxing. There was an aide, like, very gentle with him, but he figured it out mostly on his own. And eventually he got on the playground. He has a ton of friends. He's now in the second grade. He loves to be with his friends. It's the only reason he wants to go to school. He runs around on the playground, runs around in the field. He just needed his own space. No one needed to force him to do anything. And I don't believe that he was being enabled by allowing to sit there and not be a social person at that time. He figured it out for himself. So it's kind of like, what can we give up? Like, what can we back down on? Like, okay, is this really a big deal? Do I really need to push this? Um, or am I going to make it worse? And can I allow them to kind of just be? So I know it can be a fine line, but kind of that perspective, like you say, a perspective shift of what's really important here, and what am I really trying to accomplish?
Well, and that does kind of lead me to the next thought, which is where are some places that these kids can flourish? So, if, you know, when you're describing like he needed that moment and then he was able to shine in second grade, What are maybe some ways or tips for parents of, hey, if this seems like your kid, like maybe this is the type of family vacation to go on or something like that where these guys really get a chance to shine and that you said that how they feel positivity and joy on such a big scale. Where can we really give them a place to experience that?
It's a good question.
It is a good question. I think that they are all kind of like individual, and they're I'm trying to like think, and it's easy for me to think about my son because of like the different experiences he's been through. And he will sometimes, I think, shy away from things when he knows he might be overwhelmed, or when things are new, he gets really nervous because he doesn't know what to expect. And I think that's normal from our highly sensitive kids.
Yeah.
Is I don't know what to expect. Like, is this what's going to be there? And what are all these people and all these things? And it makes him, I think, a little to feel overwhelmed. So he'd rather just like, nah, I'm
Peace
good.
out.
But when I find things that are within his interests, so like my son loves to be outdoors. He likes science. He loves nature. He loves bugs. So I found like a camp at an environmental nature center for summer. But at first he was so like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. And like it was a camp, and didn't have a ton of kids. Like the classes were small, like 15 kids to like 2 teachers. So a little bit smaller than school, but he was really overwhelmed at first. But because I was able to like coax him there, and he was something I knew he already enjoyed, he loves it there and he wants to go back. And we go back every summer now. And so I think it's more of like finding what it is they already enjoy, and then
Yeah.
that will help them flourish. Like my son enjoys Disneyland. He really does. And he likes to go on the rides, and there's certain things he just loves to do there, but the crowds definitely overwhelm him. And so then it's more like, okay, what do we do to help him get through the day? Or how much time? It's more like, do we need to take timeouts and breaks and go, only spend a couple of hours? Or is there like something I can bring for him that's going to help like keep him regulated? But I know he loves it there. So I know that he can do okay there. So I think it's more like understanding who they are, and what they enjoy, and allowing them to experience those things. And I think, like Parie said, touching back on they're going to figure it out for themselves. I think when we let them experience the success and those areas that they love, they're going to want to do them more, and then want to figure it out and figure out how to like, okay, I really want to do this, and I know it's hard for me, but because I love it, I'm going to try it out anyways.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the attunement piece is also what Nicole is speaking to as well, which is honestly the activity itself. It does matter, but it's less about the activity and more about helping and being attuned to your child's needs and being willing to be adaptable to whatever situation you're in. So something like Disneyland that Nicole brought up, which is like you think, well, all children love Disneyland for 27, like whatever, for 24 hours straight.
For 27 hours, we're going to Disneyland.
27 hours. That's so funny. I don't know on that number for some reason. But actually for highly sensitive kids, the time, so it might be that he just needs like, sometime it might be that kids need like less time at one time, and they need to take breaks in between or whatever it is, but like not being so tied up in we have to spend this amount of time at this place. I get it, sometimes money is a factor, and I understand that, but you need to make sure that they are, but how much fun is it going to be if they're melting down either? So it's sort of like balancing those two things can be hard. But I think it's being attuned to their needs and being willing to being attuned to their needs, and not think that makes you a weak parent. Actually the connection between the parent and the child, and the relationship piece is actually what will be the most important determining factor how this kid is going to be in life, or successful, or like that calms their nervous system and regulates them so much to have this secure attachment with their caregiver and or caregivers. And this also can show up with teachers, so like Nicole brought up, like an aide that was helping her son at recess, or other adults that get them are so important, and that connection is so important. So sometimes it's not about the activity. It can be, but part of it is about the activity, making sure it's something they're really interested in, but also about who they're doing the activity with.
Mhm.
So maybe it's a special friend that they have that really gets them, but someone that just understands them, that's not going to be like scoffing at them, like, oh, I can't believe you're acting like this, or I can't believe you're like holding back, but just someone that's patient with
Mhm.
them. And I think a really important thing, I just had a discussion with some parents about, what is better, private school or public school? And I thought, it's such a hard question to
Mhm.
answer. It's such an individual, that's a big
Yeah.
question. But I come back with, it's really the relationship with the teacher, honestly, is really crucial. And that can happen. You can have a good relationship with a teacher at a private school or at a public school, so really, like, thinking about the perspective being different. So that's sort of what I'd like to add on to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. And again, it's coming back to what you said earlier about the world is going to challenge them in the way that you think of yourself, like the way you were maybe before you knew who your child was going to be. You probably had a traditional little plan in mind of how you were going to try and do it.
Of course,
It
don't we
looks
all?
nothing like what you ended up doing, but you tried, right? And probably you had this little discipline plan in mind as well. I know that I did. And I'm starting to understand that maybe that plan will get modified if you have a highly sensitive child, because the world's going to take care of a lot of that sort of toughening up or harshness,
Yeah.
because they're so sensitive to it and it's a pretty tough world. So it's okay to give yourself permission to be their safe space, to be their empathetic ear, and that in that situation it's okay. I understand that being scary. I totally get it, because I am terrified of sending. I have a 12-year-old. I mean, he's gonna be in 7th grade, and he looks 18, my god, but I'm terrified of maybe having not prepared him for something, and then him one day looking back at me and being like, "Why?" You know? That's all I think about, but, I now can understand that sometimes you just need that permission, that it's more important to be their safe space, because then they'll get what they need to handle the stuff later on. Just
Yeah.
giving people
That's
permission.
such a great way to say it, Cindy, because it's such a hard it's such a hard world out there, being highly sensitive. Not every aspect, but it can be. It can be, especially as a child when you don't have a lot of choices. I often speak to that with my highly sensitive, kids and teens when I'm seeing them in therapy. I'm like, listen, like, I know it's hard right now, but when you get older and you start being able to make your own choices, it does get easier. At least that part does. Yeah, then you have more responsibilities like paying bills and all those other things that we have to do as adults. But you get to choose how you do that, and that's something to, I think, as children, if they can have as many choices as possible, given to them. Not like a lot of choices at one time. That's not what I'm saying, because that can be really
Mhm,
overwhelming.
mhm,
But given any activity that they're doing, it's like having them, they need to know ahead of time what is going on, and they don't really react well to surprise things. That's not
mhm,
them, really. Like, so it's almost like, okay, here, this is what I was thinking. Would you like to do this, or would you like to do this? And it's sort of giving them some type of choice. Little choices for littler kids and bigger choices for bigger kids. But like, maybe even when they're getting dressed in the morning, do the red shirt or the blue shirt, right? Like, it's something that it's something that they can choose. They can have more control over in their surroundings, which helps them regulate themselves more too. So they can at least make some small choices when they're kids, that they can feel like they have, more say in
mhm.
things. And it's not like massive things they're having choices over, but little things. We can leave 5 minutes from now or 15 minutes from now. You can choose,
Yeah.
right? That way it's just little increments of choice that you as a parent are okay with. You have to be okay with, that's always our disclaimer. You have to be okay with either choice. Do not give choices.
The real choice and the pretend choice.
That you don't want.
Exactly, and hope that they're going to choose the real one and get mad when they choose the pretend choice.
Exactly. So yeah, that's, give choices that actually, that you actually are okay with. Either one of them choosing.
Well, that gives them ownership, which is definitely on the path to, living their own life. So makes it easy, I guess easy to process if you're thinking of it not like you're just spoiling them, you're giving them ownership over, who they are, who they wanna be.
Yes. Yes.
So I know that we wanted to talk about, you mentioned before about, some misdiagnoses or, like, myths and misconceptions. What are some common things, because there could be families who have been misdiagnosed, right?
Right, for sure, and I'm sure there definitely is. So I think there's like two categories here, like our official, like actual diagnosable disorders that they may look like, and then sort of these misconceptions about what is going on for them. And I think, maybe easier to starting with these misconceptions because, like when I explained my son and sitting in a corner, like I can imagine the things people thought about him and what was really going on for him. And so I think two of the big ones would be shyness and introversion, that these kids are just really shy, or they're just introverts. And that's completely false. And not that they can't overlap, because I am an extremely shy, introverted HSP. But, Parie, on the other hand, is a much less shy, ambiverted, like HSP. And so we can be all sorts of things. And in terms of like introversion, the differences are that highly sensitive people are just feeling overwhelmed, and that's why they stay away from people. Like they get overwhelmed, or they may have learned that having that many people around me is going to make me anxious or make me overwhelmed or make me uncomfortable. And so I need to like kind of limit my time there, or I need to take my time outs. And the reason is more of again, that central nervous system piece, where that they're feeling overwhelmed. Whereas an introvert may just, they just enjoy being with less people. It's not about, again, this like too much sensory information coming in at them or anything to do with their nervous system. It's just how they get there. They just feel more like at ease being alone, or being with less people. And highly sensitive people can actually be extroverts. And Parie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 30% of
That's
highly 30% of highly sensitive people are actually extroverted as well. So it's not one and the same, and it's not like, oh, they're just introverted. No, some of them really like to actually be around people. They might just have to like limit again some of that stuff in order to maintain their emotional regulation. And again, kind of the same with shyness. Like we don't necessarily like, I like to be around people, even as an introvert, I like to be around people. And like, again, there's extroverted, highly sensitive individuals who like to be around people. Even shy people like to be around people. But the shyness, again, is more, it's like a social anxiety type of piece, this fear of judgment and, kind of like that's why they shy away from maybe some people or social situations. Again, like the highly sensitive child, that, timidness to get into the social situation is for different reasons. And again, it's like, I need to feel this out. I need to understand what's about to happen. I need to prepare myself. So when I go into this, I kind of know what to do with myself. It doesn't have anything to do with like fears of being judged or socially anxious. It's about, again, maintaining like regulation.
I like that differentiation between those.
And then with our disorders, and Parie, if you want to like jump in at any time, there's a lot of different ones. Sometimes like ADHD could be a big one, because these kids, again, when they're not able to regulate themselves, sometimes they do different things, and like they could get pretty wiggly sometimes, I think, and they're just trying to like, manage their bodies. And sometimes like any sort of like rhythm or movement can be regulating for them. And so they might get wiggly, have a hard time sitting still, kind of be all over the place. And the more overwhelmed they get, the more this behavior is going to come out. And you see this kid like, oh my gosh, this kid cannot sit still. What is wrong with this kid? This kid is not paying attention in class. Like, what is wrong with this kid? And they're just, there's so, again, we have to remember there's so much information coming into their like little brains. Like they're not just hearing the teacher talk, like they're hearing the water fountain like drip and hum, and like somebody just walked by outside the classroom window, and who was that? And like it was so distracting. And like Billy's tapping his pencil over there, and I'm like, what is that noise? Like, why? And so they're just sort of, they're unfortunately paying attention to all these other things because they can't help it. But it's, again, not about ADHD. It's about like there's so much coming into their brains that other people are just not noticing. And so they have to be kind of taught to like tune things out and how to like keep themselves regulated. And again, this is why Parie says when they get home from the end of the day, they just kind of explode because this is what they've been doing all day. So sometimes they may look like they have trouble paying attention, but it's not because of an attention like disorder.
It's like similar behavior, but the cause are two different causes. Right.
Right.
Yes. Exactly.
Defiance, sometimes they can come off as defiant because, number one, sometimes they can struggle with transitions. And so there might look like a kind of a tug of like a little battle or a tug of war with them, trying to get them to like change their activity. Like, right, Parie mentioned, like when they're deep in their processing, even if they look like they're sweeping and you tell them, okay, we're doing this, and you yank them out of whatever they're being yanked out of, like it's really difficult for them to like come up out of where they are inside their brains to then transition. And so it can look, and so if they push back, or they're not ready to give up their activity, maybe look like defiance. Or if they don't want to do something, and maybe they already know, like, I'm not doing that because I know what it's going to do to me. And I know that that's going to be overwhelming, and I'm not going there, and I'm not doing that. And then, then again, you're kind of like in this like little struggle and this like battle with them. And it's more about them, again, like maintaining their system and being comfortable, and like their like homeostasis like stays balanced and everything, rather than like them being like a defiant child.
Sure.
Yeah. And the defiance piece is really hard, I think, because that's what it looks like, and I think from a traditional parenting lens, mind your parents, mind what they're saying, it's like, it's not that they don't want to mind what you're saying. It's not coming from a place of like, well, I'm going to see how much I can get away with. That's not even where it's coming from. It's more of like, I can't believe you're asking me to do this. Do you remember what happened last time? And it's like last time I like cried for like an hour when I got home from there, or last time like Sally made fun of me, or last time, like someone said something mean to me, or whatever it was. And I know how overwhelming that felt for me. There's all these other things going on in their brains, but it's so hard because there's like hidden depths. It's so hard to like actually put into words a lot of these experiences. So what I like to tell parents too is like, just know that it's there. You have to it's sort of like having faith that it's there. You may not actually ever hear those words come from your child, but you need to realize that like they're going through something, and that's why they're like tensing up. It's almost like you can see them tense up when you bring up like, we're going to go over here, we're going to do this. And you're like, wait, I thought it was like a fun thing. I thought it was helping them, and it's like they all of a sudden have these strange reactions. Well, as soon as you say, well, we're going, end of story, or something like that, then it becomes a power struggle. And then like, because highly sensitive children are different, they really don't, they don't care about the same things that other people care about. So they don't, like if it's a power struggle, it's not important to them. Like it's like, well, they're worried about you and the relationship that they're having, the conflict that they're having. They're worried about all of that. But they also know that their health, their mental health is going to be in jeopardy if they go and do this thing. So this is just an example, a hypothetical situation, of course, but it's not about them being defiant to be a brat.
Right.
Okay. It's because they are really having a real felt experience inside their body in that moment. So that's where that, again, that attunement piece comes in of like, hey, I noticed when I brought that up, like you kind of like tense up, like what's going on, or, and it's okay if you don't want to talk about it right now. I often say that to parents. It's like they may not want to talk about it right then or even share right then. That's okay. But just let them know that they can talk to you about it. But they know that they really can't talk to you about it if
Mm-hmm.
you're like holding firm on it, right? So you're like, well, I don't really, whatever I know you like have a hard time with that, but I don't really care. We have to do it. Then they don't think that they can talk to you about it. Even if you would like to hear about it, that's what they're hearing. So often what I tell parents is when the message that I don't think you're trying to send, but the message that they're hearing is, I'm not enough or okay the way that I
Mm-hmm.
am. Every time that you're saying you need to do this no matter what, it's like, well, you're trying to put me into a box that I don't fit in. So, like you were saying earlier, Cindy, that like you're trying to put them into the 80%,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, like more people are like that, but they're not like those people. But how can we help them succeed in the body, in the brain, in the system that they're in, and be the best versions of themselves? That's sort of what I like to try to reframe it as, so that it's not really defiance. It's more of like, how can we help them, become independent thinkers, right? Independent thinkers, self starters, taking the initiative, all those other wonderful American
Mm-hmm.
qualities, right? And highly sensitive people are really good at that. So those are also really great qualities, but it doesn't show up very well as kids, right? It doesn't show up very well when they're kids. But just realize this is going to really, bode well for them when they're adults. They're going to really be able to take the world by storm and be very successful individuals, as long as they can have enough belief in themselves and be confident in themselves and know that they can do it. And that's the job that I put back on the parent, which is like, you're going to get frustrated with them. You're going to get angry with them. They're going to get angry with you. That's okay. But at the end of the day, that unconditional love is what matters. And it's not what you do, it's what you do after what you did.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do have a regretful experience and you didn't like how you acted, that's okay. Just come back around and talk with your child and say, you know what, I don't think I handled that very well. I kind of lost my temper. I was just really worried about X, Y, and Z, and that's why this happened. But I'm going to try harder next time, because isn't that what we want our children to do, is to come back around and apologize and take ownership for their behaviors? But how can we expect that from them if we're not doing that,
Right.
right? So I think that modeling that for them is one of the most important things you can do.
Well, no, and I think that's what I'm hearing. I mean, all of this has been so helpful and so informative, and I think there's just been this trait that's been existing, like you said, in 1 and out of every 5 kids that we just have
Mm,
been labeling as something else, or we have been misinterpreting for a long time. And I think it's gonna be helpful for a lot of
yeah.
parents to hear, "Oh, this might be that." And I mean, that's what I gather what you just said, that we need to extend these guys some grace and that that's okay. We're not gonna ruin them
Mhm,
by doing that. Um,
mhm,
and that
mm-mm.
they because they're highly sensitive, they can pick up on the BS. So maybe we need to be sure that we are coming from a very genuine place from that. I think
Yeah.
that will be
Yeah,
like, just like they might be very sensitive to their environment, I think they'll also be sensitive to you being transparent about your own mistakes or how you might have mishandled something. They probably are going to be more forgiving, more understanding, more grateful
yeah,
for you coming to them to say that. So yeah, maybe some transparency would work really well for these kids, and honesty and
yeah,
vulnerability. It seems like these are all good things. These are good things to have in any
yeah.
relationship, but but particularly it seems like if you have a highly sensitive child, maybe that's where you're going to tap into their strengths, is by you being vulnerable and you giving them some grace.
And that is hard for parents to do. I think that's extremely hard. And I never want, and I don't think Nicole or I ever want to shame parents for whatever they're
Ever.
doing um, with their kids, because I know that there's always a reason behind it. There's always three sides to every
Mhm.
story, right? It's like your side, their side, and the truth. So, it's like, it's not to place any blame or shame or anything like that. But I think at the end of the day, we're here for the parents too, and I think that's the part that, like, I think sometimes parents feel like, oh God, I'm doing this wrong, I'm bad, and they become defensive or whatever, and that makes sense because, well, let's face it, they probably weren't like given all this
No.
understanding and care and support as children, right? So sometimes it's really important, and we do provide that for parents that we see. We try to provide that care, understanding toward the parent and the child because they probably haven't received that before,
Well, and
in
even
many ways.
every professional I know who does know this topic pretty well, who has children,
Mhm.
are also terrified. So I'm pretty sure that parenting is just terrifying.
It is
So I don't think
terrifying.
the goal is to be like this calm, carefree parent. It's not that
No.
doesn't exist. But if you're gonna be worried and if you're gonna be up at night anyway, maybe have some tools to think about that are actually gonna be
Yeah.
beneficial. But no, definitely no
Yes.
parent shaming because that happens enough anyway, first of all.
No.
We don't need to add
No.
to it, but
And I think when parents come to us for help, I tell them how brave they are because I think, like, it's so brave to admit that, like, you might need some support. And I wish that we didn't have to frame it as
right.
bravery, because I think it is very brave because of the society that we're in, that we're just supposed to handle everything
Mhm.
ourselves. But actually, it takes a village to raise a child, and so, like, that's how it used to be, but our society has come away from that. And so we're just a part of that village, we're just here offering support and for the child and for the parent. And so I think that's really the important part, is that, yeah, we're telling you all these different things and educating you because of things you may not have known. But that's not saying, okay, now regret all the choices you've ever made because you didn't know this information. No, you can't do any better before you know any better. Once you know better, then you can do better.
To stay in the loop with both Dr. Nicole Chavez or Dr. Parie Faridnia, visit their website at www.ocfamilywellnessgroup.com. Yay, you finished the whole episode! For more about Go Get Mom, you can visit us at thekidfactory.org/gogetmom or follow us on Instagram at gogetmom.podcast.